Wanted to show you guys what we were playing at last night. We cleaned the chimney last night. I had already cleaned out the inside of the stove. You can see our pokers are out, our scoops are out. What happened was that after we got off the roof, it only took us 5 minutes to get the roof clean. It did have quite a bit of creosote at the top. But what ended up happening was that Mr. Dirt came in to start a fire and had a really good bed of coals, and then he put on a big log. And it's the big bed of coals that lead to the chimney fires, because a newly started fire isn't really that hot. It's not searching for fuel. It's pretty easy to damp down and get it to come under control. However, a fire with lots and lots and lots of coals that then gets a log put on top, that's when you get chimney fires, because that's when you get the intense heat. And I'm not sure if I can show you guys or not. We took, I'm gonna need a flashlight. Anyway, I'll tell you what you do when you have a chimney fire. First off, the first thing you do when you realize you have a chimney fire is shut down your air vents. You don't want it to get air. You close this. However, I'm not going to suggest that you close the top down, because what happens when you close the top down is it circulates your air around your oven. So all that hot air that's trapped gets circulated around the oven. There towards the back of the oven, it was cherry red. It hasn't damaged it now, but we caught it in time. So what I do is I take my we've had 3 chimney fires in the 3 years that we've had this stove. And what happens is that you have creosote in the stove somewhere. And that creosote catches fire. It's like obsidian. It looks like obsidian. It's black, it's shiny, it's crunchy. What had happened is at the base of the chimney, right there, we had shoved the creosote down, but we didn't bang the chimney hard while we were doing that. We just brushed it. And when I got in here and cleaned it out, I didn't smack anything. I just brushed it out, because there's a little hole here at the bottom that you put your tool in, and it goes back to the hole at the back of the stove under the oven, and it cleans out everything that has come down the chimney. So Mr. Dirt, so we had that fire last night, and I had 2 galvanized buckets. The first log must have been wet because it wasn't burning real good. It was just kind of charcoaled, but it was big and still intact. So we pulled it out. To do that, you want to have on leather shoes. I moved the sheet from this away so that I wasn't going to be starting a fire if a coal dropped out. I had on my leather shoes, I had on pants, and I didn't have anything flowy on that could catch fire. We had the windows and doors open, dumped it into the galvanized bucket, this big log, and then very carefully, while balancing it so we didn't lose any coals, we walked it out to the middle of the road. At which point, Mr. Dirt got a bucket full of water and poured it into that galvanized bucket. So that, because we didn't want to start a fire in our mulch, we have a very dry month this month, and we have enough mulch that we don't want embers and stuff flying around. So then I went and grabbed another bucket, came in, and used the ash shovel to scoop the rest of the coals out and put it in a second bucket. And then we took it out and, again, left the bucket in the middle of the driveway. You don't want to scatter the wood around. You don't want to scatter the coal around, because then they'll go where you don't want them to and they can start a fire. And then we watched them for an hour to make sure they hadn't scattered. And so the big point is to get your fuel out of the stove. If you want to save the stove, you have to get the fuel out of the stove, because without any fuel, the fire, the only energy it has is what's in the creosote, rather than that being fed by additional wood in the stove. Once we got the wood and the coals out, it cooled down very quickly. It took another, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes for everything to really cool down and be okay, but it stopped roaring in the chimney. The last time we had a chimney fire, it was in the top. What had happened is we'd built up creosote in the top, and that was trying to turn red. This time, what had happened is we'd cleaned it, so all the creosote, unbeknownst to us, had settled in the bottom, and because we didn't knock it, it settled about right there because there's a slope like that in the back that allows the air to suck up really well. So you have an open chimney, and then it kind of cuts in half and slopes like this right about there, and so that's where everything had lodged, and we didn't know it. And so when we shut down all the air, what happened was the creosote lit on fire right in there and started to turn the oven metal on the inside of the oven red. And I only found that out because I had opened the door up to try and let some of the heat out of the stove, and I looked in the back of the stove and it was starting to glow red. And so that's how we knew. And there's little holes in the back of the oven, and I could see the fire there. So we closed that back up so those little holes would at least not be feeding the fire air. So that's what happened. Is it an emergency? It's definitely an emergency in the moment. And if you feel like you can't handle it, you call the fire department before you do this. However, we've done this before. We've handled it before. And our roof wasn't on fire. We had a contained chimney fire. And by getting that log out, it saved the stove. If we had poured water down the chimney, we would have had steam that might have burst the chimney pipe, and it probably would have ruined the stove. If we had poured water in here, again, you have an extremely hot situation. You would have had smoke and steam. That would be very unsafe. To pour the water onto it, you would risk being scalded. So if your point is to get the stove to cool down very quickly, you get the wood out. If your house is on fire, obviously you don't stay in the house. But our house was not on fire. It hadn't got to that point. We caught it very, very quickly. You can tell when you have a chimney fire because you can hear the fire roaring. And putting the vents on, closing the vents down won't stop it. It's at that point that you recognize you have a chimney fire, and you have to use common sense. You have to slow down. You have to get your kids out of the room, open the windows, pull the wood out, pull everything flammable away from the stove. You're trying to prevent a house fire at that point. So what we needed to have done was to thump the stovepipe a couple times to get all of the creosote to drop down to the very bottom, so that I'll show you this little plate right here. That plate, you can see the screws. Plate, that big. It has little screws. You put your tool through here, and it angles back to the bottom of the chimney, the very bottom of the chimney, and you can pull all that creosote out. And if I had better light, I would show you what the creosote looks like. We've got chunks of it in there where Mr. Dirt was able to clean it out with the brush from the top, and we just didn't realize it was there still. So we needed to thump it good. And then, as you already saw, the chimney can be lifted off. You see that? That's the end of the chimney. The chimney, that's our fire shield, our heat shield. See that? That part that kind of buckles onto it. That's the heat shield to keep it so we didn't have to build a backing on the wall for the stove. And down in there is the extension of the chimney where the creosote built up. I'll see if I can grab you some. Nope, it's pretty much worked down. Let's see. There's some of the creosote. And I think that one's already been burnt out because it's pretty ashy. So we're going to get in there and scrub it pretty good and clean it out. And take your chimney fires very, very seriously. Your house could burn down. You get embers coming out the top of the chimney that could land on your roof. If you've got mulch around your house, you could have embers falling on the mulch. For one thing, we've got this old deck out here. We actually don't have any mulch close to the chimney as far as being outside, but we have this old, very dry wood deck. You can see where we cleaned out the top of the chimney last night when we were cleaning it. That was just from the very, very top of the chimney, the little cover. That's how much I got out of it. And the reason that we got the chimney fire is that I have been doing smoldering fires because I've been doing a lot of cooking. And when you do when you cook in the oven, you have to shut that down and keep it hot and keep it low enough you can stay in the house. And so you have a fire that smolders a lot. And we had a chimney fire a lot sooner than we did last year. Mr. Dirt picked up on it. He's like, honey, I think this is we're going to have a chimney fire. And I was like, no, it's okay. I just need to clean out the middle of it. And so I cleaned out the middle of it. And he had been asking if he could get it clean for a while. And so yesterday I'm just like, I'm just going to let it stay out. And we're going to, and we got the ladder set up for him and the brushes set up for him. So good call, Mr. Dirt. I don't know. It's hard to tell if we would have had a chimney fire this soon if we hadn't cleaned it, because the reason it started this time was because we had pushed all the creosote down to the bottom, and it burns very hot when you get creosote down there, because it uses the creosote as a fuel. It's like oil. It just burns so hot. But we did definitely need to clean it though. So whether we would have had a chimney fire now having not cleaned it, or if it would have waited a couple weeks, if any more creosote had built up in there, it probably would have been a scarier chimney fire. So I'm glad that we listened to Mr. Dirt and got it done. And we still love the stove. It's a tool, and it has fire inside of it. And so there's going to be a learning curve, and you have to be careful.